Mr. Bociurkiw, thanks a lot for your time and for speaking to CNN News 18 again. You are in Tel Aviv. You've been tracking very closely the developments over the last 1 month, post the horrifying October 7 attacks on Israel and the subsequent ground offensive. Where do you think Israel stands as we speak, both in terms of internally, their perception of what's happening, and externally of how this is being received?
Right. Well, thanks for having me. Well, first of all, clearly there's no off-ramp to this conflict. In fact, Mr. Netanyahu, the prime minister, said yesterday, I think to the shock of many Israelis and also foreign partners, that Israel will have security kind of responsibility for Gaza indefinitely. That's a word a lot of people don't like because, again, there's no off-ramp to it. Of course, on the top of everyone's minds on this side are the 200 plus hostages that are still in the Gaza Strip. A lot of concern because of the relentless Israeli bombing that their lives could be endangered. Hamas has said that some have been killed by strikes, but their statements, of course, are very difficult to verify or even believe. The other thing happening here is as we speak, Israeli troops for the first time in a long, long time are in the Gaza Strip in huge numbers in the northern part, trying to secure that. They seem to be having quite a bit of ground success, and of course they're backed up by the air campaign. But also, once they're finished with the job, they're flushing out Hamas. The question will be who will run Gaza, who will govern it. The idea has been floated here that the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank right now, could come in and do that. I've talked to others, Palestinians. They don't think the PA are capable. There's a lot of allegations of corruption, and also their popularity is very low in the West Bank from doing a very poor job. And the other thing we have to say is they're definitely not going to come into Gaza, figuratively speaking, on the back end of Israeli tanks. So, some people I've spoken to said, well, maybe the only solution then will be some internationally monitored settlement where some kind of administrators come in and do the job. It's very, very difficult to see that far. One last thing that has to be said, I mean, it is a time of war, but one of the big differences I see between here and Ukraine is in Ukraine, almost 2 years on, the support for President Zelensky is very, very strong. He's really proven himself as a wartime leader, whereas here, almost from the get-go, a lot of people are pointing the finger at Prime Minister Netanyahu for what happened. They accuse him and his circle of taking their eye off the ball, of not being vigilant enough, and of arrogance. So every day that goes by, there's, again, fear for those hostages, and there's a lot of pressure on him you see all over the place here, to bring them home. So I don't think his political life will be that much longer.
What do you make of the difference emerging very openly and publicly between what the US believes should happen in a post-war Gaza versus what the Israeli Prime Minister has hinted at? We are being told that behind closed doors, American emissaries are insisting that not only should there be some sort of a timed ceasefire, because some of the support that Israel had is shrinking very quickly or evaporating quickly, to borrow some phrases. What do you make of where America stands versus where Israel is today?
Sure. Well, let's make one thing clear. America is in the driver's seat here in terms of the huge financial support. Also, when President Biden came here, and I believe Secretary of State Tony Blinken, they both sat in on the war cabinet. That is really unprecedented here. So that's very interesting. Excuse me. So there's a lot of daylight right now between the two positions. You're right. The U.S. administration is calling for humanitarian pause, or whatever the phrase they're using, whereas Netanyahu is saying, no way, that will only give Hamas a chance to regroup, to rebuild. So, but I think at the end of the day, the U.S. pressure will win, and they'll have to stop. And, the most important thing right now is for aid to get in, for the wounded to get out. There are a lot of wounded, especially women and children. So just last night, the ICRC, which is usually very quiet behind the scenes, came out and said it complained that one of their convoys was fired upon. They didn't say by whom, but they said that these are conditions that no humanitarian agency can operate. The numbers are horrific, north of 10,000 right now. A good portion of those are children. We haven't seen numbers like this in a long time. In fact, the numbers of civilian deaths actually exceeds the number of civilians who were killed in the first 2 to 3 years of the Ukrainian war, from 2014 to onwards. So something needs to be done immediately in that regard, because I think Israel, if it doesn't show more flexibility, that it could lose more support, not only here, but also internationally. There are already a number of states who have cut off relations or pulled their diplomats and ambassadors. And look, at the end of the day, if you're a country, you need as many friends as you can, no matter what the circumstances.
Just speaking on the numbers, there is a lot of concern also that some of the numbers coming in, from example, from Gaza, as you said earlier, that it's difficult to ascertain what is reality and what is not. Could some of these numbers be inflated? How do we assess what is the right number coming in from Gaza?
It's impossible to say. What we can say is that we're dealing with a enclosed enclave, which before the war started had about 2.1 million people. Like many places in the Middle East, almost half of the population are youth. So their exposure to the violence is absolutely huge. We know that these are basically urban areas. People don't have the luxury of leaving or of fleeing because the borders are closed. So it does make a lot of sense that if you do these types of strikes, that the civilian casualties will be huge. Having said that, Hamas, these are terrorist squads. These are basically animals who have no regard for civilian life whatsoever. And it does appear more and more that they're using the hostages, that they're using Gazan civilians as human shields, that they hide their weaponry, their tunnels under hospitals, close to schools. Again, it's hard to verify the videos, but some of the videos out of Gaza showed civilians who had either been injured or lost loved ones blaming Hamas for this. So there's no question that they need to be removed. And the sooner that happens, the better. And all of us are hoping that there can be a quick return to normalcy, but it will take a long time. It will take billions of dollars. And one last point here is a legitimate fear is that in this bombing campaign, yes, you may be flushing out, getting rid of the Hamas terrorists, but how many more extremists are you creating? I mean, imagine being a young person. You've lost everybody in your family. You saw how this would happen. How are you going to grow up, and what kind of feelings?
Absolutely. Michael, I do appreciate your time. Thanks a lot for speaking to us and just giving us your insight on not just the global politics on this in this case, but also what you have seen and heard and felt in Tel Aviv. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.